title is Elevating the Reporting Standards in Acupuncture Trials, an Evaluation and Introduction to the Accurate Checklist. So before I begin, I realized that much of the presentation contents are overlapping with what has already been explained in previous presentations, and I'm going to try to skip over some of the topics that's already been mentioned, such as this one, which was already covered before. I just want to mention that placebo needles, in essence, must be indistinguishable from real acupuncture needles without producing any physiological therapeutic effects, which really, again, is essentially or necessarily true all the time. For example, you can see from here, there are many effects that can't be covered or that can't be ruled out using sham needles. For example, there are visual and verbal context going on during the treatment, even when the doctor is applying sham needle to the patient. There is also tactile simulation that not only includes the application of the needle, but also when the doctor touches the body in order to get in touch with where the acupoint is, or in order to put patients in a more comfortable position, for example. There's also another component called bodily sensation, such as the chi sensation, all of which lead to enhanced doctor-patient relationship, which basically over time, if you think about how many sessions that people usually receive in order to go through a randomized controlled trial or any normal situation of treatment multiple times, this really gets to an enhanced cycle as the patient receives again and again acupuncture treatment, even if it's a sham needle. And then again, the patient will again have an enhanced level of expectation, also implying that due to prior experience, they will again have an even more enhanced expectation. All of this reporting quality, it leads to the question, an issue of reporting qualities, especially regarding sham needles, because in essence, before, when it comes to sham needles, it usually applied to stricta and consort, which is usually aimed to cover mainly real or verum needles or verum treatments, and they usually treated controls only and not necessarily covering all the components of sham needles. So again, this slide was covered before by Professor Lee, but I'm just going to go over this really quickly. So you can see that the characteristics of the placebo device may influence the apparent effectiveness of the active intervention, which led to the importance of the adequate description of placebo device. So we led two studies. The first one is we looked at what is the reporting quality on the placebo needles in acupuncture trials. So this, I'm gonna have to announce that this was already published in Chinese Medicine. And the research question was, what is the reporting quality on the placebo needles in acupuncture trials? In this study, we conducted a systematic methodological evaluation. So this was not exactly a systematic review, but it's more like a systematic methodological evaluation of the reporting qualities of placebo needles. What we did at first was we looked at all the existing guidelines and reporting qualities of clinical trials, which was consort, stricta, and also TIDER. And by this time, when we were initiating this study, a very new guideline came up by Jeremy Howick from, I believe, Oxford. And this guideline was called TIDER Placebo, of which the group mainly is based on the Society of Placebo Studies. And by this study, we tried to emulate what was already been done to validate the guideline called stricta. So what we did was try to choose the time periods identical to what's already been studied before by Prady and Sven Kirud. Sorry if I'm pronouncing this wrong, but so what we did was selection of papers for the evaluation based on previous study, which systematically evaluated the impact of stricta and consort on quality of reporting acupuncture trials. This meant that we had to choose studies from 2009 to 2010 and also 2013 and 2014. Because these studies were done a few years ago or more than a decade ago, we also included a new trial period from 2017 to 2018. And this was the inclusion of studies, the formula, and this is the flow chart. You can see that at first, the very first collection included around 3,000 papers, which all came down to 117 papers after all the eligibility criteria and exclusion criteria. And what we did was we divided them into different time periods. So between 2009 and 2010, there were 38 papers. 2014 and 15, 40, and 2017 and 18, there were 39 papers. And after looking at the guidelines that I just mentioned a while ago, we looked at, we categorized those guidelines into different categories and items. You can see that many of them are overlapping. And you can see that, first of all, the type of placebo, sham needle, includes, for example, Streitberger, Park, and Takakura. These are covered by, if you just substitute the word sham to verum, you can see this item in stricta 1A and Tidir number 1. And you can see all the following are also covered by stricta and Tidir if you just substitute the term sham into verum, except for a few of 5B and 5C, 6B, C, D, E, and 6H, all of which we referenced from previous studies, for example, Benedetti and Adler, all of which emphasizes the importance of placebo effects in evaluating the effectiveness or of physiological and somatic outcomes. I'm just going to briefly describe the selected items that we chose from the previous guidelines. Category A is type of placebo needles. Type B, details of sham needling. Type C, category C, location of sham needling. D was treatment regimen. By treatment regimen, we thought that it included the number and duration of placebo sessions and also the total trial period. Category E, practitioner, and category F, protocol and settings. And this was the process of a systematic evaluation of the studies. Basically, we tried to gain more of an objectivity in evaluating these papers by incorporating different types of reviewers. I'm just going to go straight to the results. You can see that in contrast to previous studies, which reported the quality of reporting qualities of acupuncture using acupuncture studies, you can see that many of the categories were reported under or below 50%. And when it comes to reporting quality by items, you can see, and different colors mean different time periods, and you can see that only blinding and also number of placebo needling and depths of insertion, those were the items that were basically reported very well throughout all time periods, and basically the rest weren't really reported as much throughout the time periods. And if you look at the variation or time trend across different time periods, you can see that the overall score did not change over time. But you can see that the figure below, that when it comes to the previous study evaluating the reporting quality of trials using verum acupuncture, you can see that the quality increased or improved over time, which is a contrasting result compared to our result before. So they concluded an overall trend towards increased quality of reporting following the publication of stricta, whereas we had to report that there was no significant difference at all over time. So overall, A total of 7 items out of 25 were reported in more than 50 of the studies, which were number of placebo needling, depths of insertion, placebo needle retention, location of needling, number of treatment sessions, total trial period, and blinding. By categories, only the treatment regimen category was reported in more than 50% of the studies throughout all time periods. Items which showed a constantly increasing trend over time and were above 50%, or essentially which were basically very well reported over time throughout all kinds of time periods, were number of placebo needling, location, number of sessions, frequency and duration of treatment, total trial period, and blinding. Items which showed a constantly decreasing trend over time and were below 50% were response sought for placebo needle, whether the practitioner and the patient had any interaction during the trial, whether there was any discussion regarding the symptoms, and information including the term placebo or sham. So did the patient informed of the fact that there was a possibility of sham needle being used. In comparison with existing guidelines, items modified from stricta, such as those describing the type of placebo needle, were not reported in more than 50% of the studies throughout all time periods. And items which were not listed in stricta, consort, or tidier, but were discussed in previous studies, were reported in very few studies. And previous studies on the impact of stricta and consort on reporting qualities of acupuncture trials showed an increased trend. However, in our study showed that reporting quality on sham needles did not improve over time. So after the study, we went on with the second study, which basically tried to develop a guideline or checklist that enforced a better reporting quality of sham needles, which leads to the second study called AccuRate. And I'm going to have to announce again that this was published early this year in March. And the research question was, how can the reporting quality of sham acupuncture in clinical trials be improved? So what we did was a Delphi study. Our study had shown that the reporting quality of sham acupuncture is generally underreported, and this discrepancy may be due to a lack of specific checklist. Thereby, we went on to develop a guideline that would enforce better reporting quality. The objective and goals of AccuRate basically was an extension of the consort standards, emphasizing the reporting of both the device and treatment procedure of sham acupuncture. It's recommended to use alongside stricta in studies, and the ultimate goal is to ensure detailed reporting on sham acupuncture procedures, enhancing replicability and facilitating a comprehensive evaluation of factors influencing the placebo effect of acupuncture. For this study, a working group was formed to oversee the creation of AccuRate, which involved two main stages. First was a literature review, which I just reported in the first study. And the second one was an expert consultation via a Delphi process. The study protocol was pre-registered and received ethical approval from Katsun University. And I'm just going to go straight into the Delphi study method. The second study aimed to gather expert opinions on the checklist items. This was a 3-stage Delphi, and items that did not achieve an 80% consensus were reevaluated in subsequent Delphi rounds, and the final checklist was confirmed in an online meeting by the working group. This is the timeline of our post-Delphi study. The agenda setting was done in 2020. Expert panels search was done. The first draft of Delphi study was conducted, and there was a pilot test within the working group. The Delphi study was conducted for a little more than half a year, or 6 months. The first survey went out in October 2020. The second survey went out in December 2020, and the third survey went out in February 2020. So this was done in every 2 months. In the first study, first survey, 22 items reached consensus. The 3 items were asked to be revised. So in this study, in the very first survey, we basically sent out what you've just seen a while ago in the first study, which was basically a collection or gathered checklist of different checklist items, and also some of the items invented from previous studies emphasizing placebo effect. After the second survey, 1 item reached consensus from the 3 items that did not reach the consensus in the first survey, and 2 items were still asked to be revised. In the third survey, 1 item was ultimately deleted and the other item was revised. So the response rate was 66%, 23 out of 35 experts. After the 3-stage Delphi, a working group online meeting was held and revisions were circulated, and in July 2021, Accurate was finalized. I'm just going to briefly describe the characteristics of the respondents or the experts of sham needles. There were 23 in total, and you can see that many of them were male researchers, and many of them had more than half of the researchers had more than 20 years of experience. And just for the sake of reporting, you can see that the continent of residence was very much distributed throughout the world. So Asia was about 35%, Europe was 40%, North America 13%, and Oceania or Australia and New Zealand including 13%. So the Accurate checklist was developed to guide the reporting of sham controls in clinical acupuncture trials. And this is basically a repeat of what I've just explained, but initial checklist development had 25 items that I just explained a while ago. And these categories cover the type, details, location, treatment regimen, practitioner, and protocol settings of sham acupuncture. Please note that I'm just basically trying to keep up with the text or the nuance that I was keeping in the studies or the literature. And in the first study, we usually use the word placebo needle. But later on, as the Delphi went on, we were asked to change the term from placebo needle to sham needle. So you can see from here that we are trying to use the term sham acupuncture. So I'm going to introduce to you the final Accurate checklist. The scope is to detail the use of sham controls in acupuncture trials for replicability and proper assessment of acupuncture's effectiveness. It's applicable to various study designs using sham acupuncture. The final checklist has 23 items and 6 categories. I'm just going to go on with the checklist. The very first is the type of sham acupuncture. So the type and whether it's penetrating and or non-penetrating, and the rationale for using the chosen sham acupuncture. Category number 2 is details of sham acupuncture manipulation. So the number of acupuncture needles applied, the depth. If it was no penetration, you have to state this within the paper. Report whether any response was observed, for example, tukigam or dachi or muscle twitch. Report if there was any stimulation using sham acupuncture. Report if there was any sham acupuncture retention. Report details of other interventions administered in addition to sham acupuncture during one session. For example, if you are applying also physiotherapy after sham acupuncture, you have to report this in the paper. Category number 3, location of sham acupuncture. It's basically to explain the location. For example, is it acupoint or non-acupoint, or it's whether or basically to report an exact location of the sites. Explicitly state if the points are unilateral or bilateral. This was very poorly reported in previous studies. Describe the reasons for the chosen location of sham acupuncture. Category 4, treatment regimen. Report the number of treatment sessions, number of sessions, whether they were identical between real and sham, and also report the frequency and duration of treatment sessions and the trial period in total. Category 5, practitioner, report whether same practitioner is administering both real and control. Report whether there were conversations between practitioner and patient directly linked to the trial design other than scripted instructions and preset information prior to and during the treatment. I'm going to have to explain 5B that this was basically the very last item that remained, that caused a lot of controversy among the researchers. There were patient researchers who emphasized the importance of this item, whereas there were other researchers exactly on the opposite side who emphasized that there is basically no way of explaining all this in one paper. So we had to revise this again and again to say that other than scripted instructions and preset information prior to and during the treatment. Category 6, report the information regarding sham acupuncture, whether this information states that the control is inert, and describe how sham device was blinded, and if done, if it was assessed, and if done, report any modification in the sham acupuncture treatment procedure, and report any difference in the treatment settings between real and sham acupuncture. So going through the acupuncture accurate checklist, you can see that this is a very detailed, but you can also see that if you keep up with Stricta and Consort, it's basically very similar in many of the ways. So if you're keeping up with the previous reporting guidelines, you can basically keep up with this one as well. But what we are trying to emphasize is if you do not report the quality if you do not report, for example, what's being conducted in terms of any variation between the practitioner and the treatment regimen, you might be overlooking some of the placebo effects that might subconsciously be caused during or after the treatment. So this was established to enhance the reporting of sham acupuncture in clinical trials. It consists of 22 items, categorized into 6 categories, and this aims to improve the quality of reporting, also akin to Consort and Stricta. Despite the study's limitations, such as the need for external reviews and broader expert representation, this is anticipated to clarify sham acupuncture procedures in future research. And we invite all of you to apply this in any way and give us any feedback. Any feedback are welcome. Thank you very much. I'd like to just acknowledge our team very quickly. Many thanks to Dr. Lee and also Professor Lee and also Professor Song-hee Kim from Gachon University and also Professor Yoon Byung-chae. I just found out that there's a huge typo. Professor Hyang-suk Lee is from Kyung University. I'm sorry for this. And also all the researchers who participated in the Delphi survey, who's all listed over here. Thank you very much.